¿Qué ondas, primos?
Primas
y primes.
Welcome to
My Primos
My Primos
My
Primos
Podcast. Welcome to the My Primos Podcast.
My name is Freddie.
My name is Kevin Garcia.
My name is Elia Maria Madrid.
My name is Janavina.
This is Chikume, whenever I can make it.
My Primos Podcast discusses all things fandom and pop culture,
From comic books,
Movies?
To whatever obsession we have this week.
but with a Latina
my Latin,
perspective. Remember, we're all primos,
we're all primes.
Primas.
Primos.
no matter what part of the world we're from. ¿Qué ondas, primos, primas, y primas, and welcome to My Primos Podcast. I'm your primo, Freddie. With you tonight, we have a special guest, a primo that we met at BIPOC, by the way. I'm excited to have him on the show. We have talked about his Kickstarter, his project, a little bit about his background. I'm talking about Patrick Lugo. Patrick, say what's up to all the primos. Introduce yourself.
Hola everyone, I'm Patrick. Thank you, Freddie, for having me. It's been like I said, we met in March, and we've been like looking for a chance to like sit down and have a conversation. So I'm so glad
Right.
we're finally doing it.
Yeah, it's a blast just following each other online and seeing your work and kind of touching base at BIPOC, which was a blast, by the way. I'm excited to see what next year's BIPOC brings, right? Hopefully we can kind of meet up again and kind of just hash ideas. BIPOC was a blast, man. How was your BIPOC?
Oh, we left with so many notes and like folders of little doodles and ideas. I was just so inspired, and I'm still like, I just look back at it and I get like a kind of a buzz from just all of the energy that was in one place. And
So much energy. Professor Latinx, Professor Aldama, he's a friend of the show. He's a primo, doing the best out there in Austin and, of course, worldwide, El Profe. And we're excited to see what we can do down the line. I love whenever everybody kind of joined up and you felt the energy in that room because there was so much, talent. There was so much history. There was so much excitement, right? From like creators from like the old school to guys coming up right now, you got so much in one room, and we're all Latinos, we're all Hispanics trying to make something happen. And I really love that energy. And you and me talked a little bit there, then between now and then about your project, which actually is live. It is a live project on Kickstarter. We're talking about Undead Kung Fu Ghost Killer. Patrick,
Yeah.
let's talk about that before we show the primos the Kickstarter page. We're going to go through it here in some of the images, but give us the pitch. What is Undead Kung Fu Ghost Killer?
Okay, it's it's the first like comic that I've produced since the 90s, right? I kind of got started early doing comics, but then I left comics just before that big 90s boom to go into magazine publishing. And that kind of became like the bulk of my career for a lot of years until just recently, where now I've come back to comics full steam. And so in the past couple of years, I've been doing two things. I've been doing a handful of anthologies, some of the Latinx anthologies, thanks to Professor Latinx, and then a handful of Kickstarter indie projects, that I'm creating for myself. And so this one is like kind of coming back to the comic roots, and that I wanted, rather than a big 100-page graphic novel like I've done previously, I wanted to jam out like a fun, crazy comic. And so it's October, it's the Halloween season, ghosts and ghouls. And so I wanted to do something in that spirit, right? So I want you to imagine Night of the Living Dead, classic horror movie, but remixed with Kung Fu Hustle, right? So it's crazy.
You got me. Kung Fu Hustle. I'm there. Kung Fu Hustle and Night of the Living Dead. Man, you got me. You got the hooks in me already.
It's Kung Fu versus Chinese hopping vampires. But I can go into details because it's Kung Fu. It's in China, and China has a whole continent of other ghosts and monsters that we don't really see very often in like the movies, out here.
Well, no, definitely. I want to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to show the page here so people can kind of follow along here on screen. And for the audio listener, of course, go check us out on YouTube, Primo, so you can check out the work. And also, of course, Kickstarter. When you go to Kickstarter, you can actually just type in Undead Kung Fu Ghost Killer, and it comes right up. I don't think there's anything like it out there. So Like we're gonna
There's
go to the
also
page
an
here.
an even easier way to plug it into your into your browser. You could just type in ukgk.site, right? ukgk.site is like the web address that
Gotcha.
I
Okay.
got just so that I could point it to this project, and it's easy to say, so people don't have to stumble over. Is it Undead Kung Fu? Is it Undead Ghost Kung Fu? Or any of those little
UKGK.
.site, like site.
.site. There we go. UKGK.site. SITE. Okay. So we have the page here, Kickstarter. We're close to hitting it. As of recording, we're pretty close. But Primo's like, we're excited to kind of promote the work here and show off some of the artwork and what Patrick has been up to. And let me go straight to the campaign here page. So look at that. We have the initial splash page here. This artwork. And Patrick, is this artwork all your artwork?
Yes. I'm a big fan of I do it all, right? I mean, I've spent years as a graphic designer, and so I kind of I guess I should start with one particular detail, right? Like I was the art director for a little magazine that people might recognize. It's called KungFu Magazine. That magazine has been
Hey.
around for decades. And when I started, right, like I left New York to come to the West Coast to be a part of this small magazine that was still black and white, pulpy paper. And while I worked on it, we built it up, we added pages, we made it a slick, glossy, mainstream magazine. And so I devoted years to that. But it was in doing all of those articles, like, the how to defend yourself if you're being mugged from behind or any of that.
I still remember, trust me, I still remember going to the library and checking out copies of the magazine or copies of books and martial arts books. Like, okay, I'm in my room trying to learn a kata or some kind of like, self-defense. Like, what do you do in this scenario? Yeah, definitely. So you helped with that?
I have laid out thousands, hundreds of thousands of those articles. I can't even count how many of those articles I've done. That was just like that was just my full-time job for so many years. It's a little bit scary, but that's part of martial arts is the longevity training. So I spent a long time doing that. But a reason why I mentioned that is because that gave me a chance to really practice like my sequential art, like my comic art, without having to draw, right? Just knowing how to do sequences and fight scenes and how to put together a fight scene. So now taking that with my ability to draw, because I've also done like album covers and other kind of art projects, I kind of wanted this one to be focused on just the crazy kung fu action that you can have when you're dealing with supernatural creatures, and so these things
I'm
are not
looking at.
zombies, they're vampires of a sort.
All right, so I wanted to get to the vampires here. So explain to me the jumping vampires because I've not it's okay. Vampires are in the medium, right, of horror and whatnot. We've had running, flying, transforming, right, super strong, super fast. They leap here and there, but you specifically said jumping vampires. What's this about?
Okay, so this is very specific to Asia, right? This is a mythical creature called the Jiangshi, right? And they loosely translate to vampires. They are undead creatures that they experience rigor mortis, right? So they become stiff as they get older, so they can't really run. They end up hopping. But rather than sucking your
Oh,
blood, they absorb your chi, right? Like your life essence. And that's what makes them stronger. So eventually, as they absorb more people's chi, they can hop farther and eventually they can fly, right? So that's kind of
but
like,
chi is it's breath. Am I misremembering? Breath,
yeah, no,
air.
you got it. In Chinese, chi, which in Japanese is ki, right? So you might have heard like, in a kata, people say ki or whatever,
Yeah.
right? So that means breath, but it also means like your life force, your vital energy, right? So a lot of martial arts start very foundationally with your breathing. I mean, if you think of like watching a UFC fight, and you see like the person who can last the longest has the best cardio, has the best
Yeah, whoever
strength.
can breathe that. Yeah, because you throw so many punches, you can't breathe. That's it. It's over. Yeah.
Yeah. So this mythology kind of ties back into those old school concepts about martial arts and being able to like cultivate your chi to become a badass martial artist. We could think of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and some of the crazy, like they're almost flying because they're so strong.
Yeah.
So think of that, but then think of that with a horror twist.
So
And
I see a protagonist here. I'm assuming, or a person. This person here. Is that somebody that we should know about? Like, what's the story element that's gonna pull us in to want to read the book?
well, it is really like that. The night all hell breaks loose. So we have our unnamed protagonist who is just wants to survive the night, and so her mission is to get out of this crowded city where the dead are everywhere. They're just bouncing around. They're up on the rooftops, and they're just out to get everyone. And so she's trying to survive, not knowing that of all of the inhabitants of hell, right? Of all of the creatures of the underworld, there's one creature of the underworld that has actually been waiting for this moment, right? This is the
Oh,
undead kung fu ghost killer who spent his whole life training in martial arts so that he could spend his afterlife in combat, reining in all of these ghosts and undead creatures and bringing
is
them back.
this the hero?
Yes, and so this is based on an actual, uh, really old kung fu folklore, right? There's a folk hero called Zhong Kuai that you can find in China, and he's known for being this mighty warrior who wanted to be like a palace guard, but the emperor thought he was too ugly. And so he was rejected for his, even though he was one of the best warriors and the most intelligent scholar, he was rejected because he wouldn't look good in the royal court. And so
That's
this
all.
yeah,
Wow.
and so there's kind of like a morality lesson in this folklore, because he dies alone and unknown, but the masters of the underworld recognize his potential and recognize his nobility, and so they assign him to the task of being, you will be the king of ghosts. You have to go out and hunt down and capture all the demons and ghosts that plague the world and get him back to hell. So this is the actual lore, right? This is like, you can find old texts that talk about this character, and so much so that it's become like this like a folk belief that images of this character can be used as good luck, right? They can be, his face is so fearsome that just a picture or a drawing of this hero will scare away ghosts, right? So
Wow.
that's
That's
like the
cool.
mythology that's behind the comic, right? So when I wanted to create this character, I wanted to like take ghost busting to its roots, right? This is one of the oldest literary ghostbusters that you'll find
Wow, you're
out
speaking
there.
you're speaking that geek language, man. Like it's kung fu and Ghostbusters. Like that's awesome.
Yes, yes. So when I first started at KungFu Magazine, right, like we would get like scrolls like this one, right, as just from China. We'd get shipments in, we'd get samples in. And so one scroll was of this big burly warrior with a bushy beard and a sword and a red tunic. And I was like, who is this character? It looks so cool. He was also surrounded by bats, which, being an old school comic fan, the bat signal, why did this guy have bats? That's like a whole other story, right? Because in China, bats mean good luck, right?
Oh, I didn't know that. That's
It's
cool.
yeah, it has to do with the pronunciation and then the way the character is written. So that the character for bat, if you hang it upside down the way bats hang upside down, that translates into good luck, right? So it's a
Wow.
weird kind of, it's like one of those curious qualities of the nature of like the language, how it's not how we use language, where the sound of the word is meant to describe, or the written word is meant to describe the sound, right? Lugo. With the Chinese calligraphy, the written word describes a concept, right? So sometimes they look like what they're supposed to be, right? Like if you look at the Chinese word for tree, it looks like a little tree. That's like the best example I could
And I've
maybe.
also seen some scenarios where it's like it means one thing, but it resembles another one the way it looks. Like there's a whole nother meaning to the name of the word because of how it's written or how it's.
Yeah, it goes deep because these symbols, right, represent specific sounds. And so depending on the tone of how you say that sound, you could be describing a horse, or you could be describing something else, a knife, let's say.
Interesting. But let's, I'm fascinated, because that's what we're all about, right? We're about lore, story, tradition, la cultura, right?
Mhm.
What connects you to this lore, to this Chinese lore and kung fu? What growing up, or what you surrounded yourself with, like what was this connection with KungFu Magazine? But there had to be some connection there, right? I mean, were you or are you a practicing martial artist?
I would not say that I'm a practicing martial artist because I just don't practice with any consistency. I've done seminars, I've sat in, I've learned tidbits, but one of the key things of martial arts is the consistency, right? So I would say that I have good kung fu when it comes to doing art, to making comics, because I make comics constantly, right? So that's where my kung fu is strongest, right? My kung fu for fighting, not very strong. I'm a much more mellower dude. I don't.
Can
I
you,
try
and
to
it's sorry to
avoid.
stop you, but I want to go back a step because I love that phrasing. And I know where you're going with it, and I know what you mean by it, but let's expand on it. Your kung fu is strong in your art, and explain that phrase, because when someone hears my kung fu, or the kung fu is strong in that one, or that phrasing, but kung fu is always talked on the physical act, but kung fu goes further.
I love that you spotted that. That's so awesome because it's true. It's true. And okay, so China and Chinese language has been impacting the American English for a really long time, right? We could think back to like the railroads, right? And when
Oh
someone
yeah,
says gung ho, what does that mean, right? That
move
means
forward, let's go.
they're
Yeah.
ready to rock, right? That is those are Chinese word, right? The gong in gung ho is the same gong from a gong, the giant bell that you ring. Right. Well, it means big, right? And that's the same gong that's in kung fu, right? It's big. It means like a big accomplishment. So
Oh, okay.
the Kong in Kung Fu is the big accomplishment, right? And then the Fu is what you do. So Kung Fu is like what you do really, really well. So you can have good Kung Fu in fighting, obviously, but you can have good Kung Fu in cooking, in calligraphy, and communication. That's how it's really used in the language. But because of how it's come to America, we associate it with the Kung Fu movies. Even though many of those Kung Fu movies, if you really look at them, they're about a big accomplishment, right? This person loses his whole family. He trains his whole life to be a master of martial arts, to go out and stop the bad guy that destroyed his family. How many kung fu movies have we seen
Sure.
about that?
Yeah.
Right? But we associate it with the fight scene. We don't associate it with that character's journey to master.
That's very, very deep, and I love it because, yeah, I fall victim to that idea of I don't know much of the Chinese culture or Asian cultures, unless what I consume in pop culture, right? Or unless someone breaks it down for me and explains it to me. So again, like we can move forward. Like what wrapped you in that culture that you just kind of lived and breathed it, because you do, and to be able to eloquently explain that my kung fu is strong in art, and it's like, wow, eye opener. So please continue.
So yeah, I would attribute it to my older brothers who when I was much younger, they were at the prime age for the kung fu explosion of the 70s, right? And so while I was learning to read and I was borrowing their comics, and I would be kind of drawing on those comics, right? So that's kind of how I learned to draw. And then they'd see me drawing on their comics and they'd kind of, not
Beat you
like
up.
that, chase me. And if they caught me, maybe they'd toss me around a little bit. So that kind of connected with love, right? They weren't terrible.
Sure.
But they were rough and tumble, right? I had two older brothers who were always butting heads with each other. If I wasn't reading comics, I had to watch out for their antics, And so that led to that awareness of martial arts while I'd watch them spar with each other, and we'd all spend Sunday afternoon watching Black Belt Theater together. And then they would go out and try out those moves. And I was a little kid, so I would just kind of watch and imagine and, draw it out with stick figures and eventually get better. So that kind of planted the seeds. And then just through time, I picked up Taekwondo while I was in middle school. By the time I hit high school, I was exploring jiu-jitsu. By the time I hit college, I was messing around with martial arts like Wing Chun and Choi Li Foot, right? These are like more specific Chinese martial arts. So I was kind of finished college as like your vice president of the Kung Fu Club, right? Not the person who knew the most, but I was there and I liked to be a part of it. It was always fun to do. And that kind of got my foot in the door for the job, right? They hired me thinking, okay, young artist, young graphic designer, knows a little bit about martial arts. He'll be good, and it started as a products thing. I had to design products for them. And then it just became obvious. Oh, wait a minute. They do imports. They do like manufacturing white belts and stuff like that. But then by the way, they also published this magazine that I had been reading, myself. So it just kind of was like interest and maybe a little bit of fate or a little bit of both. I had enough interest in one. I had enough skill, right, for the graphic design side to keep merging the two, and then just consistency and endurance. Like every time I would want to do something else, maybe I'll move from San Francisco to LA to try and get a job in animation. They'd be like, oh, well, do you want to have a comic in the back page of the magazine instead? And I'd be like, okay, I'll do that, and then so there was always reasons. And then as time went on, the magazine got bigger. We started moving into events, right? We started producing instructional videos. We started sponsoring tournaments. And so that gave me a chance to just constantly be interacting with other martial artists. And I mean, some of these were like high level masters. And then once you kind of are exposed to that, it just kind of changes a little bit of how you think about things, because you're seeing this 80-year-old man who's like busting out these crazy moves. He's doing splits. He's breaking bricks. And I'm like, dude, I'm half that age and no way
I can't. I wake up in the morning going like, whoa.
Yes.
Like what's all falling apart? Yeah.
And so that kept coming back, and that kept redefining like what was a baseline human capable of, right? So that kept coming back. Like I kept meeting these people who could break bricks. I met a master who could chop a steel pipe with his hands, like
that's insane.
At that point, it's just like, these are the things like, what's like the story that they tell each other that helps explain these accomplishments, and then how can I like understand that? And so
what's exciting is that we talk about these superheroes, right, and these superhumans that do stuff in these comic books, but then you've met real people that are superhuman in a sense that us that don't practice and aren't engulfed in that lifestyle would understand, right? And then it translates into turning these people, their journey, their kung fu, if you will, and you take it and then you make a comic about it because it is fantasy, but in a sense you're taking almost an inspiration of why they train, why they do what they do, and you're putting it on the page. That's very, very impressive.
100%. And it kind of goes like maybe another layer deeper, right? Because if you think about martial arts are like one of the last examples of like an oral history that's still alive, that still exists, right? Like the knowledge that a kung fu master gives their students is like a physical thing, right? They have to learn, they have to strengthen their body to be able to do it, and then they have to learn how those movements are done. But then there's also an oral translation. They have to learn the terminology, and they have to learn with that terminology is the symbolism associated with it. So if you look at that, one of the pages that I had up on the Undead Kung Fu Ghost Killer, right? Our main character, Zong Kui, is doing a martial arts move, and at the same time you see I included the Chinese characters in the sound effect, and I
Let
put a
me
little
pull it up here. I think I'm pulling it up. Let me share that so people can see what we're talking about, and that way they can. I believe I found it. You tell me. Is this the page?
if you keep going a little past it, you'll get a better example, right? When our hero appears, there it is, right? You see he's using his sword to create, to do his attack, and then the sound effect are the Chinese characters. And then if you scroll a little further down to the bottom, there's the translation, right? The translation is splitting the melon heavenwards, right? Because he's chopping the monster's head in half, right? It's kind of a joke, but it's also pointing to like a martial arts tradition where specific movements are named, and those names have certain kinds of meaning.
Yeah, a double meaning, right? I get that. We've seen that in films, right? And I hate that we don't have at least on the show today, primos, any primos out there that have the history and can know more about it. I mean, Patrick does, of course, but what I'm getting at is only reference I have are films and books, right? To kind of go off of. And yeah, you've seen terms like that where they say something like, I don't know, we'll use that same example, like rising something, and it does like it's just a, a phrasing of an action, the phrasing of something in nature, and waterfalls on rock or something. I don't know. I don't want to uh,
Yeah,
misspeak
or
on that
like
stuff.
the
But
one that I love to use the most is like this painting, right? Is called Tiger Comes Down the Mountain. And so there's a whole like poetry to that statement, but that's also a very specific martial arts move. And
see,
so
yeah,
a
exactly, yeah,
kung
yeah,
fu
you're
master
on
could
it.
say tiger comes down the mountain, and the student knows exactly what it has to do, but then there's still a whole journey that student has to take to be able to apply that movement to actually, win a fight or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I could get you. But
And
let's talk about the. I mean, when we talk about how you took the care, right? The care to really include these things, the care to have the reader, if somebody picks this up and knows martial arts, right, and knows these terminologies and these practices, are they going to look at this and go, damn, he got it right? I mean, how much care did you put into it?
I think so. I think so. I mean, I've got so many years behind me. So I think not only will they say, damn, he got it right, but they should laugh at some of the jokes because, oh, splitting the melon heavenwards. I get it.
Yeah,
That's not a
yeah.
real move, but that's kind of what happened. The guy got his melon
Yes,
sliced, right?
sliced in half. I dig it. I like it. The artwork itself, I love it because it's very approachable. And we talked about kung fu in the old films, right? We watch those old films and we look at them and go, wow, they were the superhero. They were the Marvel films of the '70s. You know what I mean? Like some of those films. And your comic book kind of gives me that vibe of like that old school look. It's very welcoming, but we still get blood, we still get fights, we still get horror on there, right?
Yeah. I
What
like
can
to
what
call it, I like to describe it as splatter-tacular because,
nice.
once he shows up, it's just more and more red. Like I could have printed this comic in black, white, and red, and I think it would have worked. But because we live in a digital age, how can I not just go crazy and use all the colors and then try and make the art feel like a kung fu calligraphy painting. I've been pointing to them, behind me, and I mean I'm wearing a shirt. This is like a shirt that has it, because that's something that like I just ended up like I had aspirations of being like a penciler. Like I wanted to be the next John Byrne and pencil the X-Men. And then I was like, maybe I should be an inker. Like I really like the precision of inking with a paintbrush. And then I started meeting these kung fu masters who could do these gigantic paintings with these brushes that looked, like a small mop. And then
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
some of them could do these paintings while standing on like a dozen eggs and not break any eggs because that was part of their kung fu. They could like, they called it like light kung fu, light walking. They could just like hold themselves in such perfect balance that the eggs wouldn't shatter.
That's
So I
so
mean,
cool.
just being around those kind of people, and some of these, kung fu masters also did artwork and they did these great paintings. And so we would trade. I would draw cartoons for them, and then little by little, I would want to elevate my own art, and I start, I got a gig doing a children's book, so that was a chance to do like painted artwork. That children's book was also kung fu themed, so like it came to me through the magazine, right? And it turned out that the writer of the children's book is also a screenwriter. So he's written a handful of movies. He's written Young Guns. He wrote
Wow.
Hidalgo, and then he wrote Forbidden Kingdom, which is the only movie that features Jackie Chan and Jet Li
Jet
in
Li.
one
Yeah.
movie.
I
So
love that movie, man. It's a very family friendly kung fu movie. I like it. It's a lot of fun.
yes, and so that John Fusco is that author. And so his great loves are horses and kung fu. And so when he had this children's book, he
That sounds
contacted.
terrifying, man. Don't tell me it was horse kung fu. That's
No, no,
scary.
actually, it was Mantis Kung Fu, right? So it was the
Oh, okay.
secret origin of Mantis Kung Fu.
Horse kung fu sounds scary, man. Sounds dangerous.
Here, look, I have a copy of the book, right? They're out of
Nice.
print, but I'm offering the last ones in my campaign.
So
But
let's.
so
I don't wanna forget that. So let's talk about the campaign a little bit because we're loving the history, we're loving the lore, we're loving how you were like embraced by the kung fu culture. Is that fair to
yeah.
say?
Yes, I mean 100%, and that's an interesting thing because I mean, coming from growing up in New York and then moving to the West Coast, right?
Yeah.
There was a strong martial arts community in New York, but a lot of those martial artists were either African American or Latino, right? Like, and there's like a strong. I think that there's a strong. It's something that I always have difficulty articulating it, but I think it has to do with like communities that are in diaspora kind of gravitate towards something like the martial arts because it's got such deep roots in like
It's a
like
sense of belonging, right? Like this, like
it's
holding
the
on
it's,
to something that is hundreds of thousands of years old, and you have
yeah.
some kind of connection to it that grounds you, right?
Yes, exactly. And so it's like, and yet like part of the martial arts, like part of the ethos of the martial arts is like to go out and make sure that these teachings endure, right? They endure the test of time. And so it's almost like this like chocolate and peanut butter combination where like we have these people who have like a missing section in their history, right? Like they have a history, but then there's a piece in the background that's kind of been displaced because of colonialism, etc.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And so something like this other deep history kind of fits in, and then all of a sudden there's this sympathy in terms of like tradition and the reverence of the family, and like a structure that defines where you can start and then where you can end up, right? So like these things have I think have always been there, and then I
It's a
kind of
promise. If you think about it, it's a promise of that old thing, and I've talked about it with my wife and friends. Of if you work hard, if you stick with it, if you make sure that you're true to it, it will embrace you and it will take care of you, right? That's been a very long tradition in Latino culture as well. Of like, hey, you work hard, you take care of your family, you're an honest person, you're fruitful in this way, right? That goes hand in hand with a lot of what the kung fu teachings have, at least from what I've learned, right, on pop culture, and from what you shared. It goes hand in hand, so it kind of attracts that into promise of, hey, this tradition that we've passed down or handed down, you've earned the right to be part of this, that's why I think it connects us. Like if you talk about the diaspora, you know, they're lost. They're looking for a way to. I'm not a fan of assimilation. I think that assimilation kind of erodes things, right? Erasure, it becomes erasure at a certain point. But I think that whenever you do get accepted by another diaspora like that, it also shows how those traditions, no matter what part of the world we're from, we're all connected in some way,
Agreed. Exactly. And it's like there's a really fine line, but that line is differentiated by time spent, right? Like the willingness to start, to start on your knees and work your way up, right? And that's like such a part of the martial arts ethos that I feel, despite like, tons of great action movies out there, not as many stories that really kind of spotlight like that ethos, right? And so I feel like that's something that I could bring to young readers, especially, but then to like a broader audience who already like they get it when we talk about kung fu movies. I'm like, I say Kung Fu Hustle meets Night of the Living Dead, people have a picture in their mind. And then within that, I could hide little gems of like philosophy and meaning, so that those handful of
Can I be the guy that most martial artists roll their eyes at and go like Karate Kid, right? Like Karate Kid. Like I love Karate Kid, but that is what it is. It's that that meshing of two different cultures, right? Two
yeah.
different two different worlds, and we fight. We love that connection because we all feel lost at a certain point in our youth, and to have someone come in with that knowledge, like you said, all that oral history coming down on you. But with your book, I'm excited for it because of the fact that pretty much remember the Kickstarter is live. It is still live out there. We want to make sure we support Primo Patrick here, getting the book not only to fund it but beyond, because there are some perks. I don't want to ignore that. We'll talk about these perks. Patrick, which one of these we want to go over, because I know that we don't want to overlook any of these perks, but especially in Kickstarter land, there's always great rewards. I know there's one where you can be part of the actual comic book, so I want to go over that with you. Can we go over that?
Yes. Well, okay, so here's my philosophy with Kickstarter, right? Like Kickstarter really helped me like shift gears from magazine publishing to comics. And so it's really been a great space. So I like to create rewards for like anyone's level of commitment, right? So like I've done the single comic card, right? I've gotten, because KungFu Magazine let me do a single comic in the back page of their issues many years ago. I got really good at doing one-page comics. And so I've taken all of these like philosophical stories and distilled a handful of them into one-page comics that I print on postcards, so that you could just have for $5. I'll just mail you a comic that's in a postcard. It's in an envelope. You could put it up on your wall, or you could throw a stamp on it and send it to someone else. And, oh, my nephew has started Taekwondo classes. Let me send him this martial arts story and get him stoked, right? $5. Super, super simple thing. But
Yeah.
then it's also like a chance to pick up my other books, right? The children's book I just mentioned earlier, my graphic novels, A Tiger's Tale 1 and 2, which that was like my huge project. I spent many years taking all of the information that I was learning from these kung fu masters, and so you can see my distillation of the kung fu cards that shows little stories, right? Like an individual story, a little martial arts fable in one page. But then over the course of 100 pages, right, I did a Tiger's Tale volumes 1 and 2, which that's like everything I've learned to date about martial arts philosophy in a set of graphic novels, right? That's volumes 1 and 2. So that's like everything that we're talking about. I kind of crammed into these volumes, and then Undead Kung Fu Ghost Killer is the thing that has come out of all of that work. Does that make sense? Where like
Yeah, because it's like it's a journey, like like everything kind of leads up to this, and all the work you've done, your background and the work. Like there's Tiger's Tail we talked about, and
right,
like
so
there's
that's like
so
all of the
much to pull
philosophy
from.
that like Tiger's Tail is like the big picture. It's like the Jungle Book meets Enter the Dragon, right? This is like
Wow.
why are tigers so important to martial artists? Like so that's kind of where that picks up. And then Undead Kung Fu Ghost Killer just kind of takes place in that same world, but it's for us older kids who wanna sneak into the scary movie that night.
We want to see some blood, man. We want to see some heads get chopped in
Yeah.
half.
And the thing is that like there's a whole genre of movies, of like kung fu horror movies, that hardly show up on the West Coast. So
Yeah,
in
agreed.
fact, I just found out about this, and I wish I can go to LA for it, because they're releasing like a 70 millimeter restored cut of this 1980s movie called Mr. Vampire, which is like
Never heard of it.
Yeah, I mean, no one has, unless you're into martial arts. It's a classic. It's like a 1985 kung fu horror comedy, all about the Chinese hopping vampires. And
Hold on, I'm Googling this.
it spawned like 4 sequels. It's nuts.
Oh man, Primos, here I'm gonna show that screen real quick so you guys can see it here. But Primos, remember, we gotta support the Kickstarter. Again, you said ukgk.site.site, so we can see that. And look at this. Is this what we're talking about?
Yes, Mr. And so in LA, they're doing like a restored big 70 millimeter screening of this movie. And oh man, it's a long drive from San Francisco to LA, but it's a short flight. So, if only I could make it. But this is the movie that's kind of like the spirit. Its blood runs through the veins of Undead Kung Fu Ghost Hunter, and so the fact
nice.
that this movie is being released at the same time as the campaign is just kind of like
serendipitous, man. It's something there,
Yeah, and then so it's just like I'm doing this Kickstarter so that I could do a print run of these comics and then get them to local comic shops, right? But it's also a chance to kind of get all of my work, right? A Tiger's Tale, all of these other projects, and kind of present them to new audiences, because like I've built up a small following. I have a newsletter where people subscribe and I send them free comics every month, so that every 6 months or maybe once a year, when I have a big project, if they like what I've been doing for free, maybe they'll buy the book, and so far that's kind of been working. And so like this project, I wanted to make like a Halloween treat, right? Something that's coming out specifically for the season, but also has my own personal trademark. Like it's a niche within a niche within a niche, right? It's
I love
a comic. It's a kung fu comic. It's a kung fu horror comic. It's a kung fu horror comedy comic. And then it's done in the style of like Chinese calligraphy, right? Like the artwork is meant to have that same.
Because it looks wet. Like it looks almost like wet, like moist on screen when you look at it, and so I love it. I think it's a great style. I think it's like you said, akin to that, and the calligraphy style, which kind of leaves that like that like intentional like grunge to it, you know. And so I dig it, Patrick. I really do. Primos, you know, before we end the night here, I want to just kind of again remind you, go check out ukgk.site.site, which is Undead Kung Fu Ghost Killer. That's the Kickstarter, which is live. Let's go for those rewards. There's even one where you can be in the comic. Is that right, Patrick?
Yeah, those are the I've been so consumed with the minutia, right, with all the stuff behind the pages, because that's where my passion lies. But I've got two things that I think are fun, right? I have the Enter the Comic, right? If I have time, I'll do it as like a Enter the Dragon poster, except it'll be a comic. But it's basically there's a scene where like all hell has broken loose. Things have settled down, and now all the villagers are pissed and they're looking for someone to blame. And it's all like, what's going to go off next? And so there's a scene where if you want to be one of those angry villagers, like you can get in on the action and, I'll get your likeness and I'll get you in the comic. I've done it before with the Tiger's Tail, and it's always kind of fun to see who shows up where. In volume 1, I sent like 4 backers to Shaolin Temple, right? And it turned out one of them has been to Shaolin Temple. So there was like,
there you go.
It was the snake swallowing its tail. But then I have like the big premium, like this is the heavy duty reward, right? This is for the people who really feel it, right? I call this my wuxia warrior tier.
Let me pull it up because I want to show the art. Let me pull this up so people can see it, because I want to show them what you're talking about. I think it's gorgeous, and it's such a really cool idea. And there you go. The wuxia warrior.
Okay, so let me explain. Wuxia, that is the term that we use when we're describing Kung Fu movies, right? That is the genre, is wuxia, right? Wu means martial art, martial, fighting, and xia means heroes. So wuxia are like heroes. And so with this reward tier, what I do is, I'll get some photo reference, and then I'll do like a little bit of an interview where I find out like, what are your favorite Kung Fu movies? If you were a master of a specific kind of weapon, what would it be? What's your power animal? Like I've done this before. I do it like maybe no more than 5 times a year because it takes like some research. But then I'll get their likeness and I'll illustrate them. I'll like draw out their inner warrior, right?
That is such a cool. I know I can't zoom in and give it justice, but like the tiger coming from this guy's pose, like that's insane. Like
well, okay, so that guy practices Black Tiger Tibetan Kung Fu, right? So I had to kind of do that because that's him, So that's the thing. Like I have done hundreds of photo shoots with some of the best martial arts masters in the world, like. No joke, like top tier, like the person who is the best of that specific style, People who've been to the temples in Wudang, dozens of Shaolin monks, right? So not only do I have like a massive photo database, but I've got years of experience working with these martial artists to like get that pose and really like capture.
Primos, if you guys want to donate to, just at My Primos Productions, My Primos Podcast, you want to bless a primo with a wuxia warrior, art by Patrick Lugo. I'm not gonna be upset at that. I know Patrick would love to do that. I'm just saying because this is one of the coolest rewards.
We've been talking, right? So I can see the Tai Chi flowing already, and
you see there's an energy here. I don't know what animal. If there's a turtle or like a ferret. I don't know, like something like that.
Okay, well, I can tell you, there is a martial art for almost. So there is a turtle martial art. Dude. Okay.
I mean, there's a whole other show
the turtle symbolizes the stomach in Kung Fu, right? So
I mean, I got that going on, man.
right,
You
so
got me.
yeah, and then it also symbolizes like the iron body, right? Like the ability to like. So I've seen martial arts masters who have perfected iron body so much that like 5 other guys can charge them. This is on film. This is on my YouTube channel. I can share it. 5 other guys can charge him with like a telephone pole, and he will not budge. He will knock them
Wow.
back rather than get knocked over by these guys like hitting him with the telephone pole. Like that's turtle kung fu for you right there, you know.
Man, no wonder the turtles are just badass, man. Turtle kung fu.
That's that's why they live for hundreds of years, you know.
There you go. Shit. I'm excited, man. This is really cool stuff. And Primos, please go support Patrick. I mean, it's just a cool concept. The care he's taken into this, the fact that we want stories out there that we can enjoy. I mean, just because I'm a Latino doesn't mean I have to stick to one genre and one thing. You know what I mean? Because of the fact that we have voices and ideas for any genre. I have a friend that writes comics, and he's concerned that he can't write a samurai book because he's not of that descent. Patrick, what can you tell somebody that wants to just dive into kung fu, even though they're maybe not from that culture per se? I mean, is that something that is looked down upon? I don't think so, right? It's pretty accepting culture.
It's part of like it's part of the spirit of the martial arts is for it to spread and to endure, right? So it's just really about like how you enter the household, right? Like if you come into the house, take off the hat, you know, show the respect, you'll be welcome. If you're willing to put the work in, you know, you'll get the rewards. But if you show up and just assume that you deserve X, Y, and Z, you're owed X, Y, and Z, you're gonna get, you won't get past the front door. But anyone, it's just like put in the time, like show the genuine interest, right? And so that's like when I do these comics, right? I do them because I wanna like on behind all of the fun art and the crazy story, I want to hide some of the like philosophy so that if you go into Google and you search for stuff, or if you go to one of my websites, it'll only take a couple of clicks for you to find some of the crazy Easter eggs that I hide behind these comics. Like I have websites that are specific for like the educational information so that I can be creative and do the fictional work to please my artists, and then this way people can go and be entertained by the fun stuff, but then there's also a place where if they really want to learn some of the resources, some of the dates and locations and, when exactly was that first story written, like I've done the homework. And so I put that.
So you're telling me that if I wanted to write a kung fu book, kung fu story, if I took the time, the care, went to your websites, reached out to Patrick Lugo, and asked for some help, we can make something happen. I'm not barred from it.
100%. And, that's the thing. Like, I'm fortunate in that I still have a network. Like, if I don't know, I probably can find someone who does because, that's part of that, like, interconnected community of martial arts is that, that knowledge is precious. And because it's precious, it should be shared.
I love that. I love because like with everything we talk about, right? Our stories here, right? We talk about how we want to have proper representation, and have representation in all facets, right? So I don't want people to feel that, and why I keep bringing it up is don't feel that as a writer or a creator out there, just because you can't write a kung fu story or a samurai book doesn't mean you can't. It means take the care, take the time. We have plenty of creators that are white writing Latino stories that do take the care, that do reach out, that have people come in and help out, right? Make sure it's the right tones. I think that the juxtaposition of just all these cultures clashing in a fight, if you will, but at the same time, the harmony that comes from knowing the struggle, and you talked about being disenfranchised and being a diaspora, it just lends itself to want to share between each other, primos. I always say it, no matter where you're from, we're all primos, right? No matter where you're coming from, a walk of life, there's something that connects us. And I love, Patrick, that you're bringing in this into our our viewpoint, because I would not have thought to sit there and go, man, like as a Latino, can I really watch and then create a kung fu film or a book or a story just because, well, I'm not Chinese, I'm not Japanese, I'm not from that world, not from that culture, but I consume it, I enjoy it, I love it. If I go out there and I just consume so much knowledge from it, I can't keep myself from wanting to share it, right?
100%. And the thing is that if you put that time in, you'll start realizing that there are already connections there. Like I was talking about being a New Yorker who moved to the West Coast to work for this KungFu magazine. I ended up getting to know a lot of martial arts masters who were still based on the East Coast. Talking to some of them, I would find out, some of them obviously Latino. Some of them were like the first break dancers of 42nd Street, New York in the 70s,
Yeah.
right? These were the kids that were sneaking into the 42nd Street movie theaters to watch kung fu movies so that they can come up with new breakdancing moves to bring to the cardboard on the street, right? So
yeah, man, for sure.
that culture, like there was already cross-pollination in that culture, and that like hasn't stopped because now those martial artists who are now like the seniors, they're producing like off-Broadway plays.
And they're
They're
still popping,
hiring
locking.
young martial artists.
They're still
Right. They're doing the whole like the hip hop kung fu fusion continues. It did not start with the RZA, but he is like, one of the
well, yeah, he's all
exemplars
about
of
it.
taking it to the
Yeah,
next
yeah.
level, right?
Shaolin, yeah, for sure, yeah.
It keeps going. So it's like the connections are there. We just have to kind of take the time to look, to untangle some of them.
Don't be
and see those
afraid to do
threads.
it. Don't be afraid to do it, because I feel there's a little bit of a fear of like, am I crossing a line? Am I going to be accepted? But I think that what I got from your message and from your book, right, from your body of work, is just put in the care, the time, and the work, like the kung fu for your art.
Yeah.
It's not just that. That's it. Put in the time, the work, the energy, everything you want to put, that you want to get out of it, put into it. And so that's what I get from it, Patrick. I think, man, I can stay here and talk. We can start talking movies next time,
But, I mean, I haven't even discussed like, going to San Diego Comic-Con and how there's a kung fu connection to some of the Eisner Award winners, who like the degrees are there, I know the martial artists who did the kung fu consultation for the graphic novel that won an Eisner Award, etc. Like it's this vast network. You just have to have the willingness to see it, right? To see the forest for the trees, as some
like that.
philosophers say.
Don't be afraid, Primos. Don't be afraid. Patrick, where can people find you? What's your website? What's your socials? Where can the Primos find you? And of course, Primos, we know we got the Kickstarter. So the Kickstarter will be here on screen. Editor, make sure we got the screen here. We got the ukgk.site. So you can go check out the Kickstarter and go. I'm taking, if you want to donate in my name and give me that top tier, I will not deny it. I'll gladly accept it. But if you want to do for yourself, that's fine too. But Patrick, please, where can we find you?
Okay, so until Halloween, the place where you'll get an immediate response from me is ukgk.site, right? On the socials like Blue Sky and Instagram, I'm either Plugo, Plugo, or Plugo Arts, because my website is plugoarts.com, right? PLUGOARTS. And that's where I have my newsletter that comes out like every second Tuesday of the month. There are free comics in it. There's like I do movie reviews, right? Like KungFu Magazine sends me to the movies so that I could examine the fight scenes for the next Marvel movie or whatever. That's my beat, is the comics movie scene for KungFu Magazine. So
Awesome.
So there's always stuff that happens along those lines where I get to interview stuntmen and martial artists and other random stuff that if it doesn't make it to a specific platform, it comes out, in my newsletter or in my blog. atigerstail.com is where you can find everything you want to know about my graphic novel series and the whole, the learning resources associated with my martial arts comic. And any of those places, I for me, it's so much about the community of creators that surround, any artist. And so I love those people who take the step to be like, to engage in art, right? Because art cannot exist without that person, engaging it, right? Like those cave paintings would not exist if there wasn't some caveman sitting there telling them, we got to go hunt a mastodon now, So reach out. I am so happy to connect with folks, anyone, ask a question, leave a comment. I'm there for it.
There we go, Primos. We gotta go support Patrick. Go get the Kickstarter funded and move beyond this, and of course get those stretch goals. Reach out to Patrick. I appreciate you, Patrick, for coming on the show, man. It's been a blast. I'm glad we got you on. I hate that we didn't do it sooner because I'm all about it, man. I'm all about just kind of spreading that word, and I really wanted to touch on, your work, Kung Fu, more than just the physical act, but Kung Fu as a philosophy. And the fact that, I always want to say, I always say it at the end, but, and I hold it true. No matter where you're from, we're all primos. Check in on each other, look out for each other. And you never know, primos, just a quick phone call, a quick text on somebody, just let them know you care about them. Because times are hard out there. A lot of us are going through a lot of things in the country are happening right now. But one thing we can rest assured is that there's always somebody out there that needs a quick phone call. You never know what they need. But remember, take care of each other. And from me, and of course, Mr. Patrick Lugo, we want to say good night. Cuídense. Till next time. Adios.
Gracias.